Welcome back to The Real P3, People, Problems, and Perspectives in Animal Nutrition and Health. Today, we're coming to you from World Pork Expo with a conversation that gets right to the heart of one of the most persistent and costly challenges in swine production, PRRS. In this episode, I'm joined by Rob Langenhorst, Technical Sales Manager with AAF International. Rob brings a microbiology background and years of experience working with air filtration and ventilation strategies in swine systems. And unfortunately, as Rob says in this conversation, PRRS still feels a little bit like chasing a ghost. Since 2021, rapidly changing strains have continued to put pressure on producers, veterinarians, and production teams who are trying to protect pigs, reduce breaks, and keep farms economically viable. We talk about what producers should consider when evaluating air filtration, including the difference between positive and negative pressure systems, why a barn filter is not the same thing as a home air filter, how viruses move on particles like dust, droplets, and dander, and why barn age, sealing, airflow, and ventilation requirements all matter. But this conversation is not just about filters, it is about systems. Filtered barns can still break. Air filtration is an important tool, but it does not replace people protocols, supply entry, loadout design, feed bin risk points, transport biosecurity, monitoring, or animal resilience. And as an animal nutritionist, I'll say this clearly. Nutrition cannot fix PRRS, but nutrition can support the animal. Biosecurity helps keep disease out. Good management, nutrition, and care help prepare the pig when disease pressure shows up. So in today's episode, we're talking about clean air, better barn design, practical biosecurity, and why PRRS control has to be taken seriously on every front. Let's get into the conversation.
Well, welcome back to another World Pork Expo. It's a little deja vu that we're talking again.
It is.
And we're still talking about PRRS.
Yes, unfortunately.
Have you been up to date with what's going on with PRRS today?
Unfortunately, quite a bit, yeah. So I try to stay with my master's being in microbiology and a lot of research with PRRS. I try to stay pretty close to understanding what the viruses are doing. And unfortunately, since really 2021, the lineage 1C strains and therefore continue to rapidly change. And kind of like we're chasing a ghost, it seems like. And so that's kind of caused the producer to really be, in a tough spot to try to, make money, right? To keep the doors open. And we're seeing, really last year and even this year especially, we're seeing a huge increase in the amount of producers, inquiring about air filtration and trying to find a way to help, not necessarily stop it completely, but to reduce those breaks that they're exhibiting now.
So if I have an existing sow farm, and that's probably where we're putting filtration today, what has to go into my thought process when I want to put some filtration in from AAF?
Yeah, good question. Obviously the first probably one is, do I want positive pressure or negative pressure? That's a huge question, and I get weekly almost that, which one do you prefer? I'm doing this for almost 10 years now. It's like, I still can't give you an honest, yes or no one way or the other, because each one has their pros and cons, and it kind of what fits best in your production scheme. And so that'd be the first one. And then we would go into, okay, what are like your ventilation requirements? Because depending on those will dictate what type of filter we are putting in there. Whether that's, typically nowadays we see a lot of MERV 15 filters out there, but we have a new high flow MERV 16 that's coming out, and then obviously the new line of the BioShield filters that are animal science dedicated, and those give us a lot of options when we start talking about remodeling farms and what's the best fit for them.
And we have to be clear, we're not talking about filters that I'm filtering my house air with.
Correct. A filter is not a filter. Typically what you see in your house is just a pre-filter. A lot of producers use those, but they're a first stage filter that is there to just catch the dust that's blowing in the air. It's not the primary filter that is, filtering out the virus that potentially might be floating around outside their farm. And
so what do we have to do in a from a filter standpoint to actually, because a virus is very small. I mean, you can't even see it with a naked eye.
Correct.
So what are we taking into account?
Typically, we see viruses typically do not float by themselves. They're always usually on a transport vector. So usually dust particle, water droplet, dander, those type of things are typically what they're on. Now, obviously, what I mentioned, a lot of those are blown in the wind as well, right? And so that's where the air filtration aspect comes into play. We expect those bigger parts to get caught into the media, filtering out those viruses as well. And so that's kind of where those filters are designed to remove those particles in that aspect.
And obviously you're filtering out more than just PRRS, just viruses. You're gonna filter out other bacteria.
Bacteria, we're already into the poultry side of things, so we know it will capture HPAI. That's obviously a big issue in the poultry side of things. Most viruses, flu, all those fit within that viral range that will still be trapped in the filter itself. So very, very good aspect to, and our main goal is to provide clean air, right? That's the main goal for our company, to produce the best quality air for those pigs.
Curious on these filters and your work as a microbiologist, and we talk about different diseases and industries. Do you think we're also keeping our employees on the farm healthier and safer?
100%. I would say, especially from experience myself, working in the industry for many years, especially like in the wintertime. It's hard sometimes to breathe inside those barns just because the dust, there's not much ventilation moving. Where with these filtered barns, that ventilation has a specific setting a lot more, to where adequate airflow is important and it's clean. It's coming in that barn, and so it makes for a much more enjoyable atmosphere for workers, which obviously that's important too, because without the workers we can't raise pigs.
So we were here last year, we talked about the recent data that came out of Minnesota. Can you, refresh the audience a little bit on the results from that data?
Yep. So that was the data with the University of Minnesota, and what it was take 16 years of the MSHIP database, where I think roughly 2 million sows are reported weekly of their health status. And so they took that data and looked at filtered and unfiltered farms, and what were their break rates. And so in the end, when all the dust cleared, it came out to be 58% PRRS reduction in positive pressure farms, 51% in negative pressure farms. So both do a great job. There's no real statistical difference between those two. But what's huge about that research is it gives us a number that now we can take to the bank, because pretty much every producer knows their break rate on every one of their farms. And if they're not filtered, and if that's something they're considering, they can take that number and say, look, this is how many times I break now, this is the reduction I'm going to get, this is the ROI that I'm going to end up with.
And what does that ROI or that payback time look like to go filtration?
Typically, one PRRS break saved will more than pay for the cost of filtration. And like we talked about, that's not your home filter. Those main filters, they're out there for 5-6+ years. So it's not something I'm going to change out next week, next month, next year. They're long life in those filters.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the evolution of different types. Kind of walk us through the different types that you have developed, or what's the options and the pros and cons, or advantages, disadvantages.
Of the filters themselves?
Yeah.
Yep. So typically what we saw, say 10+ years ago, MERV 16 still, and that's the one step below HEPA. Those are typically bore studs, because obviously there's the high health farms. Then most of the sow farms, as they went into filtration, depending on negative pressure, is pretty much the predominant one back then. That was MERV 14s in the summertime ventilation, still MERV 16s in the wintertime ventilation. In 2018, AAF launched the MERV 15. So that was a big change, because now I'm getting an extra layer of protection and without compromising much from an airflow standpoint. So that is a very prominent filter used today. Now, as I mentioned before, we're we just got the new high flow MERV 60. So another layer of protection without compromising much on airflow. So that's a huge change in that. And then another thing that we have this year is our 17-inch deep filter. That production has now been moved to the United States, which is nice and helps out with from lead times and accessibility standpoint. That will be also offered in the MERV 15 and the high flow MERV 16 as well. So the 17-inch MERV 15, that's the highest airflow mechanical filter out there. So it's great, and those 17 inches are great in the fact that they're designing projects and they might have only a certain amount of space or don't have a lot of space for filter banks. So you need less filters, obviously, right? So that helps from a cost standpoint. I do not know what the cost of a linear footage of construction right now, but I'm sure it's very expensive. So all that adds to savings in the end for the producers. So our goal is to try to help producers save money, protect the pigs, but also without selling the farm at the same time.
If I had a traditional tunnel system today out there, I'm using a cool cell potentially. You said positive versus negative. Can you walk us through making that decision?
So there's still a lot of questions there around that question. So age of the barn is number one. Typically what we would see is if it's an older barn, say 10 plus years old, those would typically be turned into tunnel ventilated negative pressure. Newer barns, I actually had a discussion with a customer earlier today. His barn's only 2 years old. Wasn't filtered though. Now they've been breaking a lot, wants to do something. His walls are all concrete. So exterior walls play a big role now. What are they made of? Concrete, probably not gonna leak. If it's a sticking mortar or sticking plywood barn, there's a lot of leak points. So I gotta consider that in, okay, how am I gonna seal that barn up, right? But from a positive standpoint too, it's like, okay, I have to have a sealed roof and ceiling to have a positive pressure barn. Okay. So that means if it's an old barn, most likely my tin might be getting old, trusses might need some replaced. So it's more feasible sometimes where if it's a brand new barn, I'm certainly probably not gonna remove the roof just to seal it in. So some of those, just the barn itself will dictate what direction those customers go.
Doing some of these projects, have you found a lot of air leakages that producers aren't aware of?
It can happen. That's probably some of the aspect of they maybe not completely understand what they have, what their system is, and what those concern points. Because like I said, when I used to do this, working for a producer before AAF, a lot of those farms are negative pressure. So we were doing a lot of audits very frequently, and you're going around the barns both inside and out looking for any hole, batten strip, sill plate, window, door, any of those things. Air is always going to take the path of least resistance. So it's your job to try to seal up every one of those spots, right? That's one of those kind of cons against negative pressure is I gotta make sure everything's sealed up. Where positive pressure is always pushing out, so I don't have to worry about quite as much. Okay, I got a nail hole over here, but it's not going to leak. So those are those things that, if they weren't quite educated in what they need to look for and monitor, that could be where, some of the things might slip through.
I don't think I've ever been in a barn that doesn't have a hole somewhere.
Probably not.
I worked in some really bad ones. Not pig related, but I'm like, oh my gosh, your drafts, you gotta get this fixed.
Yep.
But it was drafting everywhere.
Exactly. Yes.
I've been involved with a lot of biosecurity stuff because obviously PRRS is a problem. I can't fix PRRS with nutrition. I can help support the animal, but I can't fix it. People talk about UV lights, putting that up with filters. Then the debate, well, it doesn't touch the UV light enough. Is there other technologies that should go into my mindset? Because you're at least controlling the air. But we have the live pig, we have people. What are some other technologies besides the filtration components? Because filter barns still do break.
That's very
and
right.
It's probably not due to the air.
Yep. So my best analogy is biosecurity is an onion. and an onion's full of layers. Air filtration is one of those layers. And the choice to move to air filtration is a big decision making, but it's also a process change because everybody has to now follow specific processes and procedures to ensure, just like you said, other areas that potentially could track it in. A lot of times we see heated supplies rooms, pressurized load chutes. Away went the Danish entry of where you just take your shoes off and walk right in. Now it's, you're showering in. They got UV boxes to bring in their lunches. There's a lot of different things that producers have installed to try to break those potential entry points. Things still happen. We talked to someone today about empty feed bin line and air going in that way. And it's like, yep, that's a risk point, And we control what we can control. And that's all we can do. But there's always going to be something that potentially can slip through. But as long as we're doing the process and procedures 24/7, 365, we've got a very good chance of keeping it out of the farm.
Yeah, I just hope someday we don't have to wear, the crazy lab get up, BSL level 30 lab suits.
Yep.
But yeah, well, I really appreciate your time. I think this is an important topic. I think, as you said, I'm glad to hear you're getting a lot of calls on this because it is a concern, but having solutions of really thinking through what the next step is and how we can do that with what we have today.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, that's what we're trying to offer, right? AAF is about producing clean air for our producers and giving them options, not just you got to do it this way. It's giving them options and email, phone call. I mean, we're more than willing to help sit down and go through those designs and work through things of what's going to be the best fit for those producers. And so we're willing to help them do whatever they need. Let's try to help slow the PRRS spread for sure.
Thank you so much, Rob. It's glad to have you back on the Real P3.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Real P3, People, Problems, and Perspectives in Animal Nutrition and Health. At Animistic, we believe animal nutrition should be accessible, practical, and rooted in science. Whether you're developing a new product, solving a production challenge, or looking for a partner who can help turn ideas into real-world solutions, we're here to help. We are animal nutrition experts who want to become your innovation partners. To learn more, visit animistic.co. Until next time, keep asking better questions, building better solutions, and helping animals and people thrive.